Liveness has been achieved. Of course, it'll take everyone a moment to get in. It serves them ads and everything. And I'm not turning those off because, this is a lot of work. And if I eventually get like, I don't know, $10 mailed to me by Twitch, I can buy a book with that. Or I can buy half a book with that.
That's right.
Or I can buy, 1/7 of a book if it's from Intellect. Depends who it's
and I'm
from.
always happy to subscribe and support colleagues.
Yeah, that's a good time. So, yeah, we'll wait for a few people to come hang out. But yeah, welcome, folks, to Kudomusicology, where we give kudos to Ludomusicologists. Hello! Good to see ya. So today is the last, unless we decide to renew this partnership. This is the last in our series on with the AMS Ludomusicology Study Group. So we have Brent here today representing AMS Ludo. Welcome. Y'all having elections? Will you be changing up your ranks, or do you still have a little bit of time before all that?
Oh yes, we'll be doing that at the MegaCon, but we'll be taking nominations before then. We'll probably put out an announcement for that.
Wonderful. So let's float that out there. Be thinking if you want to have a role in shaping you get a guaranteed session as the Ludo study, as any of the study groups. And so the audio it's reading a bit soft. Okay, I can't boost individually because I'm not using a whole thing. Are you able
try to talk up?
Talk up.
Talk maybe a little louder.
Yeah, okay, that's reading better to me.
I apologize.
No problem. Excellent. So, what was I going to say? The Ludo group is nice because you get to kind of craft these interesting, waves from car. Hello, Karen. You get to craft these really interesting sessions and sort of make decisions about what types of things we want to see, and you can bring in guest speakers. There's a whole process, but you can apply for money from AMS to bring people in. Sometimes it's not enough to cover like industry speakers because their fees are a lot different structure than us, but it can be nice if you wanted to do kind of like almost like a mini keynote. But often it seems like the goal of the group has been to really just have like broad coverage and have like, we've done a lot of like mini lightning talks or like panel, like papery type sessions where you can go around a room and see a ton of different talks. And that's a really nice way to get some coverage without just like focusing only on one thing. So that we've done some really, really neat ones. And
we'll be looking for a member at large and a junior co-chair when the meeting comes around as well. So a few chances to get really involved with a virtual conference coming up in January. So
that's so good. Yeah, and the nice thing about being like junior co-chair is then you kind of ease into the role, and then you can kind of take the reins once you're like, oh, okay, this is all the check boxes to get things scheduled for the meeting and all that. So definitely, if you know anyone, it's a really great place for somebody that is kind of new to the field, students. It's a really nice way to kind of step into the Ludo world and have a really active role. So yeah, we're very, very happy about this idea to do the whole study group collabs. So I've enjoyed this quite a bit. I'm happy you're here. And let's welcome our star for the day, Andrew S. Powell. Hello. Hello and welcome.
Hello, Dana.
It's so good to have you here.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all for having me.
You've been our one of my trusty moderators, and now it's your turn in the hot seat. So, are you nervous?
Very excited to talk about a wonderful game/non-game. I guess we could
non-game
describe it.
Yeah, you call it an interactive drama, which I'm intrigued about.
Yes.
So we will give specific warnings. This game gets pretty gory. It's drawing on a lot of slasher film and horror tropes. Most of the videos are pretty tame. There is one that's pretty violent. We'll tell you right before we play it. And I think it's one that you should be able to, it's mostly like a musical cue. You should be able to listen to it maybe with eyes closed if you don't want to see the things. But we'll tell you when those are coming up. So no worries. But there is here's the citation for today. We are looking at the musical butterfly effect in Until Dawn. This is from JSMIG in 2020, and this is open access. If you go to the link, or just Google the title, you can read this one for free. And there are the video examples and all the music examples and things up on the site. So this is one that's pretty exciting. I always like when things are open access, and we can see right on the front page that I snipped here that the content warning is beautifully displayed, but here it is again. The video game discussed in the following article contains graphic and violent content, including physical violence, blood, gore, profane language, and psychosis. Video examples that include scenes of violence or gore are labeled, and I wore my bloodiest red lipstick for today in honor of the gore. So I like a theme. Always have. Always been a theme party Halloween type. Give me a theme and I will run with it. I also have red sleeves. So all right. So you start out with this kind of like rumination on the opening up of interactive drama and like the choose your own adventure-ness of video games.
Yes.
Playing entire storylines as different characters and getting to see things from multiple viewpoints and having alternate endings. And so the line between film and video games there are a lot of places where it's been blurred, but in these types of games, they seem to be blurred more. So you're using this term interactive dramas specifically.
Yes.
Where are you getting this from, or is this kind of your own way to separate these out, kind of similar to like the whole walking simulator, navigable narrative thing that we saw from Elizabeth Hamilton?
So this has been a rather problematic term and phrase in the industry in general, both from the player and fan side as well as the business side. They have these gameplay elements, but they also have these sort of narrative construction elements. And the question then becomes, are you focusing more on the construction of a story, or are you focusing more on the actual playing element? And games of this sort of nature focus less on the actual gameplay elements. The purpose of the game becomes more creating a story and creating variables of a story, as opposed to completing specific tasks or the win-lose scenarios. So it's a change of the focus or the intent of the game itself. With the term interactive drama, it's sort of become like the catch-all term for any and every game or any and every experience that has this shift away from what the intent of the work itself is. And it's been applied to sort of the interactive DVDs where you're sort of choosing your own path in a film, or the choose your own adventure books. It's not necessarily the type of the medium itself. It's more or less the purpose of the adventure.
Or like, what was the Black Mirror choose your own adventure Netflix thing?
Oh, yeah, that would be
I'm
an
totally
interactive
forgetting.
drama.
It wasn't Black Mirror, but it was the Black Mirror people. What was that called?
The Snatch, I think it was called on Netflix.
Thank you. I loved that. And I actually have it like very linked with Breath of the Wild, because I was playing that game like intensely while we watched that. So like for some reason those two things are linked forever in my head. Because I was in the South exploring like the tropical region in Breath of the Wild. So like I have very strong associations between those two. But wonderful. Yeah, so I guess that kind of falls along those lines. And as we saw with Elizabeth Hamilton's work and like, Walking Simulator being kind of derogatory, there really are strong feelings about like there needing to be a lot of gameplay. Visual novels are also in this category, like you're just clicking through. And
yes.
Even though your dialogue the choices can have implications and branching of the narrative, there are folks that are like, this isn't playable enough. I kind of wonder to the extent that like the quick time events, QTEs, are in there to kind of sate people a little bit, make it feel a little bit more active. Mm-hmm. But that's a common mechanic in some of these games. So there has always been a blurring. These particularly blur the idea of, is it a film, is it a video game? And you're less interested in like creating that strong dividing line, but instead looking at that point of intersection. And it turns out that narrative's a good place to look at this, right?
I believe so. And again, that just comes from my personal experience, film in particular, and how the narrative itself is constructed.
Yeah. So, Until Dawn is by Supermassive Games from 2015. What platforms was this? I don't remember.
This was exclusively for PlayStation 4. This was one of their premier exclusive titles, especially when the system was first coming out. They had originally designed it around what was going to be the PlayStation Move, but as it evolved, it then just became a PlayStation 4 title.
Okay, yeah. And the first time I was telling this story to folks behind the scenes, but the first time I read this article, like right after it came out, I didn't know the game, and I was like, oh, it sounds like Cabin in the Woods a little bit. That was my frame of reference, because I'm like, oh, they all go to the cabin, and it's like got some subversion of tropes and horror movie stuff. Mm-hmm. But then I went back to it for this, and I realized in that time, since I originally read it back in the day, Joe and I had sat down and watched some Let's Players. I think Loading Ready Run folks had played it around like Halloween or something. So I was like, oh, this game. So just funny that I didn't recognize it based on the title, but I was like, oh, this is that one. So it's really, really beautiful graphics. It's very, very polished and well put together. And I saw particularly skillful or maybe informed players, because there are some sequences I probably would not have been happy to see. That I did not see in that playthrough. So as we were also discussing, we'll get there. So this is by Graham Resnick and Larry Fessenden, and it's very much drawing on 1980s slasher horror films and kind of 1990s onward survival horror games. And the premise is to survive until dawn. Makes sense. That's the title. So there are 10 chapters, each spanning an hour. Is that real time or game time? The hour?
It is it depending on how you play and how the story unfolds, it could be both. It usually takes about 45 minutes to an hour of real time to go through it. Each chapter covers 1 hour of game time.
Okay, cool.
So it goes from about 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
So kind of thinking along like Julianne's idea that you can have like totally different timelines, right? In this case, it's a little bit more of a 1-to-1. So that's cool. Our characters, anyone who's ever seen a horror film will recognize the types here. So we have Sam, the, quote, final girl, starts kind of passive, but is compassionate and level-headed. We have Josh, the rich son of a movie producer, owner of the Blackwood Mountain and Lodge where the game takes place, the cabin in the mountain, cabin in the woods. We have Chris, who's Josh's best friend. He's a sarcastic nerd who hides his true feelings under that sarcasm. None of us can relate to that character, right? Right, Andrew?
Yes.
As
Ziggy Stardew just noted, concerning Josh, Remy Malek as Josh does such a fantastic job.
The voice acting in this is pretty great.
It's not even voice acting. it's a motion capture.
Oh,
it's recorded
okay.
live in studio, and then they.
That's awesome. I did not know that. I guess that, and then the graphics are beautifully rendered over that. So yeah, cool. That makes sense. We have Chris, Josh's best friend. He's the sarcastic nerd. Then we have Ashley, who's our observant, imaginative bookworm, Chris's crush. They may or may not develop feelings for one another over the course of the game. We have Mike, who is our immature alpha male class president, thinks with his libido. And his new girlfriend, Jessica or Jess. She's promiscuous and provocative. She's the mean girl. There's Emily, Mike's recent ex, who is intelligent but insecure, narcissistic fashionista who still harbors feelings for Mike. There is Matt, who's Emily's new boyfriend, kind-hearted jock known more for his brawn than his brain. So, for some reason, even though we have all these different characters, again, this is the trope, right? You get very different types of people, but they're all friends somehow. They're all in the same friend group, and they're hanging out. They do this trip every year, an annual winter get-together at this cabin. But Josh's twin sisters, Hannah and Beth, disappeared the previous year and have been presumed dead, so that kind of puts a damper on things. You'd think they just wouldn't do the trip in subsequent years. But I don't know. It's like, you do you, guys. If you wanna do your trip, even though the cabin is kind of tainted now, go for it. We also get a bunch of horror villain archetypes. So we get our stranger, the nomadic hermit living in an abandoned sanatorium, of course. He carries a large flamethrower. He's hinted to be a serial killer. He observes the group from a distance in creepy ways. And then we have a masked psycho who's kind of based on characters from psychological and gore/torture porn genres, like the Saw movies. Also has a little bit of Michael Myers in there. So we get these like very stock horror villains. But there's a twist. They're red herrings. Yeah, no worries. Pop back on if you can, Brent. If there's any... Oh, there you go. Hello. It's just going to resize your window a little bit. We're fine. Okay. So yeah, the red herrings. The stranger's actually protective. He's watching out for everybody. So the watching isn't creepy. And the psycho is actually Josh. What? So, it turns out that he has a bit of a struggle with the whole Hannah and Beth being presumed dead situation. So the psycho is actually him.
Yeah.
And then our actual antagonists are the Wendigos, specifically one, and Makapitu? How do you say this?
Makapichu.
Makapichu. Okay, thank you. Makapichu. Okay, so we have kind of a leader of the Wendigos, but yes. they are characters from folklore, and they have big claws and they use them with glee to murder.
They're humanoid creatures that are born. I'll go ahead. Let me give a content warning here as we're going to deal with sort of graphic material. So anybody that needs to, please feel free to mute. I'll give about, say, 3 to 5 seconds. In folklore, this is coming from the central northwestern part of the United States and Canada. The Wendigo is a humanoid creature that is born out of an act of cannibalism, where a human spirit has been forced to eat another human, and so it's retained some elements of its humanity, but it has grown elongated fingers that have become claws. The teeth have become stretched, and it has a craving for, in particular, human flesh. So it still has basic symptoms of a human, but it is sort of like just a stretched out form of it. The Pichu is, as you had noted, the quote-unquote leader of a pack of Wendigos. Its strength would be a little bit greater. Its speed would be a little bit faster. So it's sort of the alpha of a pack, if you will.
Maka Pichu. I'm just going to keep practicing saying that. All right, y'all, buckle up for some film theory, because Andrew comes to us with expertise in film, which turns out is real useful. But it does mean that these may be folks that we haven't read. So we get into David Bordwell has some work on film with forking plots that present alternate realities or outcomes, different outcomes from a certain fixed point. So Sliding Door and Run Lola Run, I think, were some of the examples given. Those were, what, both 1998? They were both the same year, weren't they?
1996, I believe,
96?
was Run Lola Run. And then,
okay.
yeah. But they're both mid-90s.
90s.
This is a period where we start seeing a lot more of the branching path narrative or the forking plot narrative take off in film.
Yeah. So there are 7 conventions that Bordwell cites: linearity, signposting, intersection, unification, parallelism, inequality, and finality. And interactive drama ends up having strong parallels with the first 5. But the last 2 we don't really get, because in film the final path is often sort of given superiority just over the placement. It's kind of given that privileged place over the other alternatives, the one that kind of really happened, or at least it can be read that way, the most informed by what's come before. It's almost like it takes into account like what the audience knows from all of the other versions. It's kind of like, I don't know, self-aware in that way. Is that a way to put it?
Mm-hmm.
In interactive dramas, though, every plausible ending has to have validity instead of privileging only one. And of course, we have games where we have like the good ending, the bad ending. This is really common in like visual novels, right? But to be this more interactive drama where we are focusing on playing from different points of view, we have to be able to have kind of multiple good or bad endings and, being able to experience them and not have it be, the only one. The real one, I guess, is just the one that you play, the one that you achieve in that sense. Gives it some replay value too, if you want to see some of the other endings.
That's one of the essential features, especially with interactive drama, as opposed to where Bordwell's film theory is coming into play. We have the finality of film because there is only one possibility. It's the one that is presented to the viewer, and because that is the only one, it has to be deemed the one. Whereas with the interactive drama, we have to accept multiplicity, because any and every is achievable. It's contingent upon the actions of the individual that's constructing the narrative. The narrative itself is malleable, as we'll ultimately get to.
Super cool. And so both in these films and in the video games, the audience and the characters may learn from the branching options, so the player can use what they've learned in previous playthroughs to inform their current one. And so the difference here being you can have an effect based on what you've learned instead of just like learning along the way and then seeing the final result. Now we can make choices and learn through that repetition of multiple playthroughs and apply that information to influence actions and outcomes that go beyond Bordwell's theory. As you write. I really liked this, so I quoted it. Films are strictly limited to visualizations of future events, but do not hypothesize simultaneous presence. I loved that turn of phrase. A feature that is instantly mitigated through multiple gameplays in the interactive drama. Simultaneous presence. Yeah.
Yes.
So in this case, because I guess we can in film have like point of view where, you're seeing the same scene over from another character's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I guess in that case, it can't truly be simultaneous, I guess. Is that the argument?
Correct.
But here, this is more about like the potential.
Right. It's they cannot coexist as valid at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and whereas here, like, all the possibilities are valid. And, yes. you may not like some of that. You may be like, crap, I didn't want to die there, and then go back and want to replay. Exactly. But it's considered valid from the standpoint of, like, the rule set, the gameplay possibilities. So then we get to Edward Brannigan suggesting that the audience is the ultimate author of these experiences, since we have the capacity to imagine alternative plots even if a film doesn't present them to us. And interactive dramas really allow us a space to play out those possibilities within some that, you usually can't do absolutely everything. But the more possibilities that are playable to the player, the more immersive and powerful that interactive drama can be. If you feel like, wow, this really can go a lot of different places. I always feel that way. I haven't finished Life is Strange, but anytime I've sat down to play that, I have that sense of like, oh my gosh, so many different things could be. I don't even know what things are happening,
Yes.
I see that something had an effect, and then I go, oh gosh, what did I do?
Yes.
So we get to Henrietta Heidebrink's question mark game narration continuum, which is a good way to think of all of this. Instead of this whole like ludology versus narratology, like that there's actually a continuum we can place things on. That's a nice way to bridge the gap here. And this is quoting Heidebrink. While stories are regulated by dramaturgy, games are determined by rules. Additionally, stories are generally dedicated to morals, normative structures, and the changing motives of their characters, while games are geared toward challenges and goals in which the motives of the players remain fairly stable. While narrative constructions tolerate a certain amount of inconsistency, games in contrast are bound to the total consistency of the rules. And while stories are determined by plot and thereby driven by subject actions and events, games are often driven by timelines and spatial regulations. In stories, the plot construction exists in its own right, while in games it mainly serves the ludic purpose. Useful way of separating things out a little bit. So, interactive drama, you say, is a moving target along this continuum. So we're able to really apply both film and sort of ludic analysis to it. Yeah. Just as video games, can combine multiple genres within a single title, they can also kind of combine more filmic, more ludic elements. So this is where we define interactive dramas. There's an emphasis on a scripted story. It's narrative-centric gameplay. There's a lot of cutscenes and FMVs and, kind of plot-driving sequences where you might not be playing anything directly. Gameplay objectives have narrative consequences, especially quick-time events and puzzles that the player might have to solve to progress, or also dialogue trees and things like that. The individual does have a choice, and we have all these branching story options through our actions, the dialogue, the choices that we make, and we have multiple possible endings, all of which are viable and plausible.
Yeah, the fundamental problem I encountered, especially when attempting to define it, has been the tendency to force it into the either-or dichotomy, as opposed to accepting it within its own genre and understanding that it's not one or the other. And personally speaking, I don't think it can be one or the other. We have to understand that it's a hybrid form.
Yeah. And so you're only going to get part of the picture if you only look at it from the film side or only look at it from the ludic side. You're going to miss things. So neatly, you can also put the music in these games along the same continuum, where the music can have a degree of freedom to apply to multiple contexts and playthroughs and maintain its meaning or its sort of identity. And it can appear or not appear, based on your actions. And so music does have this narrative potential, the ability to express narrative function when present, yet does not alter or change the individual or overall grand form when absent. Which almost feels like you're saying the music doesn't matter, but that's not at all what you're saying. It doesn't matter if the music isn't
almost
there.
the inverse. It has a fundamental meaning, that fundamental meaning may not be present if you perform in such a way that that fundamental meaning's not present in a playthrough.
Yeah.
So it comes down to how you construct the narrative in a single experience.
And all of this ends up relating to our buddy Espinarsith definition of ergodic literature. If you haven't read Cybertext, it's great reading. I know that game studies literature can be really vast, and we now have a point where we have such a growing body of Ludo-specific literature, but most of us will say there are some folks that it's good to step outside and read. Cybertext, is it texts? Cybertexts? I don't remember. Is it plural? Cybertext?
I think it's just Cybertext.
Yeah, I think okay. So Cybertext, good to read. I'm a big fan of like Jesper Juhl. If we're talking like game studies, Mackenzie Work, good stuff. So worth a read. I also think it's always interesting if you're working on a game and you yeah, that's true. If you're working on a game and you find kind of like game studies stuff on the game, so often it won't touch on music, but it will be really useful in kind of framing how the game is constructed, and always worth digging into some of those places. If you're totally the affect book. Enable. I'm not quite sure how to say Aubrey's last name, but there's a book on, and it's sitting on my shelf somewhere, on affect in video games. It's really great. All kinds of good stuff. So ergodic literature or texts, this is a term that is good to be familiar with. And Arsith remarks that players are constantly reminded of paths not taken that might be closed off, you can't always know the exact consequences of choices. So me playing Life is Strange, being like, oh no, what did I just do? Every time I see the little flutter. And in this game too, there is that like, oh gosh, something had an effect. What did I do? Is it good? Is it bad? When am I going to find out the effect? Will I? How will I find out the effect? That stuff can be very hidden from you. So that can be kind of anxiety inducing, but it's also very, very realistic that we can't know how these conversations are going to go, and how the other person's going to take things, and which is kind of the right answer in a given situation. So the music that has a narrative potential has these features. So appearances of a cue share the same narratological implication throughout recurrences, even though they may or may not be present during the course of a single playthrough. Appearances of a cue may be during ludic events and functions or during filmic events and functions. Appearances of a cue are the result of player performance and choice, activated by the player's construction of the story. Cues may be indicative of events past, present, or future with respect to the narrative itself, not gameplay. A cue may provide information for the current playthrough or subsequent playthroughs. And all cues may be considered to exist in potentia in the diegetic universe of the game, whether or not a given musical event is activated in a single playthrough. Here's your walkthrough statement. You were saying on Twitter, you're like, I don't think I have one. You do. It's just, you do a lot of your exposition first. You do a lot of your kind of literature review setup, and then you get to it, which is maybe the only difference. But you totally have one, at least as I decided to explore this concept of cues with narrative potential. 3 different musical examples with different functions and frequencies will be explored in their use throughout until dawn. Each cue appears within the context of one or multiple sources, e.g. cutscene, QuickTime event sequence, choice, discoverable item, and may appear within the context of the fundamental events of the game or diverging options obtainable through successive playthroughs. In paralleling Heidbrink's model, the analysis will slide across the spectrum from a traditionally filmic function of associative cues identifying a motivic intermediary that blends form and function towards a seemingly explicit ludic stinger in a solitary chord for indicating character death. There you go. Couldn't be clearer. It's just a little further in. What do they tell you in the undergrad to like put your thesis statement at the end of like the second paragraph or something? But this goes to show you like that didn't come across as jarring at all. Feature. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and also how long the essay is. So you do a lot of setting it up, and then you're like, okay, now here's the case study, and here's how you need all of that. You can't do that statement without setting all that stuff up first. So I think it works. The flow is great.
With one of the challenges with this article and this subject is essentially carving out its place in the field, because it's not quite film, it's not quite video game, and yet it's both simultaneously. And so it's sort of the I guess we can call it the RC Cola defense. We have to defend its right to exist against two monoliths, and be willing to say this is why we're going to bring it to the discussion, and we have to defend its reason for this argument before we even get to the argument itself.
Mm-hmm. Not to mention, this is not a Zelda game, so you do have to like set up the game a little bit, because I'd be curious in the chat how many folks knew this game before this, have played it, or were familiar with this. Like I said, the first time I read this, I had no idea. I just read it and I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then kind of forgot about it, and even when I saw the playthrough, I don't think I connected it in my head. But yeah, I ended up doing the Let's Play. And then when I read it again, I was like, wait. Just goes to show you, pandemic brain makes things go right out of your head. So now I have good notes on this, so I won't forget it probably ever. Actually, I've noticed my recall of every single thing I've covered on this stream has been excellent. So it's good synthesis. So again, it's very selfish. This whole stream is about me getting better at my job. So thank you. So in this game, the whole butterfly thing is not just pretty. This concept of the butterfly effect, that the smallest action has these global repercussions in the world, is actually turned into a custom game engine and a mechanic in this game. It was developed before the script even, so before we even have the narrative, and it's all about, and it was patented, right? Their specific engine they patented for this game.
I believe so.
I think I saw you write that in there. It was all about creating nodes for critical divergence points, and then has this really strict autosave feature at those moments. Yes. So for folks that are like, wait, let me make the other choice, let me go back. Like, nope.
Yeah, it is very strict, and it's very annoying, especially when you're trying to do research on it.
I imagine you probably had to do so many different playthroughs and like pull stuff up online and put that in conversation with yours.
A couple thousand hours.
1,000 hours. Wow. So you just played it all yourself. You didn't rely on Let's Players.
No, I did it all myself.
Dang. That's awesome. And honestly, we applaud the effort, and it shows that you know the game so well. And you had conversations with our composer, correct?
Yes, he has been tremendous help, and hopefully will continue to be as this project and the larger project continues, and further discussions are ongoing as we're looking at some of his further work in the interactive drama with the company Supermassive.
So cool. It's so nice when like the company is not trying to cut off the scholarship. Like I get proprietary, things, but it's really frustrating because you're like, we're trying to, really take a deep look at this game and do more than we can get from like superficial transcription and things. And then I don't know, it's like the companies some companies just really don't want to do that. But this is why it's nice to work with some of the less giant developers, perhaps. That there seems to be like an openness.
I would really like to thank Jason Graves and Supermassive for all that they've been willing to do and all their assistance, as well as acknowledge the complete lack of assistance from Sony. So.
Yeah, yeah, how often we've said this. Oh, hello, folks that are jumping in. Yeah, we've said this often, like, oh, I sent an email and didn't even get like a no, you know? Then you're sitting in this limbo where you're like, well, they didn't even respond to me because I'm too small to care about, right? That can be so frustrating. It's like, I'd rather just get a no than nothing, because then you're like, okay, what do I do? Okay, I guess I'll keep writing or not. So it's really exciting, and even in the work that I have coming up at AMS, being able to work with a composer that retains rights to the music, and it's not all bound up, and they're able to share things with you and show you the whole process and the implementation, and that there is nothing like that. It's brilliant. And we have this problem in film too, where like some things are much more accessible than others, right? Yeah, I've heard a lot of folks be like, I want to write a paper on, John Williams. Can I get it? Like, no. You're not really going to get much traction there, but go to Frank. Frank will help. And it's because Frank has gone into a theater, pen and paper, and like transcribed stuff by ear. He's amazing. Frank Lehman, that is, for folks that don't know who we're talking about. Yeah, and Emilio, yeah, excellent. There's excellent work, but it's been this workaround because there has been, bureaucratic blocks, shall we say. So anyway, we have this butterfly effect mechanic, which ends up creating this allows them to create a really intricate network of paths relating to character development, their emotional and relationship status, and physical damage that they sustain by all of these creepy horror events. And then suddenly we get some Schoenberg. Hello. Hello, Pierrot Lunaire. Which is cool. You pointed out in a footnote, it was actually Steve Reale kind of turned you on to this one.
Again, major thanks to Stephen Reale for mentioning this and bringing up the butterfly relationship.
Yeah.
The specific trichord reference. Yes.
So we're going to see there it is. I guess we'll look at it first. So we'll come back to this, but there's the score. Hello. The opening of Nacht, which is the 8th movement. And it begins with a 3-note motive that okay, now you're going to have to explain some things to me. It outlines the 014 trichord, consistently stated as an ascending minor third followed by descending major third. The middle pitch generally serves as the genesis of a new statement of the 014 trichord. For example, the opening statement of the motive consists of the pitches E, G, E flat, and the pitch G instigates the second motive, G, B flat, G flat. So okay, that makes sense. I know enough to know, okay, there's brackets around these numbers. We're talking about pitch class, right?
Yes.
Explain it to me like I'm 5, though.
Okay. So we are looking at a 3-note collection, and we're essentially just finding a way to describe the relationship, the intervals of the 3 pitches that are contained within it. So if we're looking at the E, the G, and the G flat, we're going to be looking at the most compact way to describe the distance between those 3 pitches, no matter how they're voiced in terms of octave, the ordering of the pitches, it won't matter. We're just looking for the most compact way to describe it. And I'm going to be describing it by the number of half steps or semitones. One of the ways that I often use with students to help describe this would be to put them on a clock. And so when we arrange the 3 pitches on a clock, or we arrange them so that they're in their most compact form, we see that the smallest possible arrangement, or the smallest possible distance in consecutive order between these 3 pitches is a single semitone, or 1, and then 4 semitones, or major third, from a specific starting pitch. And then from that starting pitch, it would be R0, then 1, and 4. So this is sort of just a general name that we give to this collection of 3 pitches to identify any and all collections that share this intervallic relationship. Has a minor third, a major third, and a semitone between all three pitches that are involved.
So basically, it's like movable do. You can have the same interval relationship no matter where you're starting on. And this is also a way to not be implying tonality, correct? This is a way to kind of move like from implying kind of functional harmony and just look at pure pitch relationships.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's very
all we're doing is we're removing the octave. We're removing a central tonic, and we're creating a 12-tone pitch space. We're just looking at inharmonic equivalency so that all 12 chromatic pitches are even, and we're just finding the most compact way to name a collection of 3 pitches. And it doesn't matter if we're going clockwise or counterclockwise on this sort of space that we're identifying our pitches.
That really helps. And I gave warning that I was going to ask this because let's all remember that Dana had conservatory theory, so I actually never got any of this. As I often tell people, I didn't even do anything with like matrices in theory. We did like tone row, inversion, all that in music history. It was like, a question on a test. So we had to know the basics of how to do like retrograde inversion, but we never worked within that space in the like theory core. Never got any counterpoint. Like this tends to shock people because they're like, wait a minute, like I had to do that stuff. Nope, we didn't. I don't know if Cleveland Institute of Music has changed, and if they've like overhauled the theory. But when I was there, the sense was very much like, why are you wasting time on theory? Go practice. They used to say if you're getting an A in any academic class, you're not practicing enough. Like that's the mentality. And that included, you would think like, okay, but like music history and music theory is so important to your development as a musician. But even those, like they were like, just get by. Like, oof.
That stings right here.
Me resisting that is why I'm not doing, well, there are a lot of reasons I didn't do orchestral auditions. I couldn't afford the instrument. But, in freshman year, they're like, you really need like a $12,000 violin. I'm like, are you paying for that? But, and that's just while you're in school. Then you need to step up in the 100K range to take the kind of auditions they prepare you to take, to be competitive. But yeah, I took music history sophomore year and I was like, I love it. And, I started bugging the medievalist and just like showing up to office hours to talk about things that weren't even in the class. He would just like assign me extra readings, and clearly that's why I ended up where I did, because I was like, I like this stuff. I like reading. I like writing. I like foreign languages. I like, looking at music and figuring out what makes it work. So, but yeah, my theory has always been a source of insecurity for me. So, like, I want to get better. I really should just like enroll in some courses like from people. Private lessons, but like all the stuff that I didn't get that I want to learn how to do. But anyway, thank you for the pitch class tutorial. I appreciate it. And, maybe we have some folks in the chat that aren't as familiar in the same boat as me. It's a trap. What, the master's in theory is a trap, or...
Master's, PhD,
taking the theory.
It's all.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. And theory ends up like really opening up after you kind of get all those basics out. Like most theorists are doing such interesting work. But I think the undergrads are like, do you just sit there and do Roman numeral analysis all day? Like they don't understand that, like, no, you're learning how to create new models.
Yeah.
It's cool. Anyway, so here's Knocked. There is a fun byproduct of having this like kind of cascading, I guess is a way to put it, where the 014 keeps creating more 014s, and in this case, cascades upward. But so the byproduct of this motivic construction is that we actually get a descending chromatic line, which you can kind of see in these middle voices, right? So we get E flat, A flat. And Catherine Puffett's analysis of Pierre Lunaire here suggests that these two motives become emblematic of the external program, which in this sequence we have a swarm of black butterflies descending from the heavens as a metaphor for the falling of darkness. So we get both the flight of the butterflies implied in this kind of like soaring leaps, but also they are descending on us.
Yeah.
And
so
there's
the
often
literal
a
descent, and then especially since go ahead.
I was gonna say also the like that half step slide down. We often think of like flatting stuff as kind of making it like darker. I think about like violin land, you know, if I play an A flat, that's a stopped string, it's not open, it's not going to resonate. It has like what we perceive as a darker tone as well.
The Baroque descending bass line in opera for its references to death, you know, especially since Pierre Lunaire, the O4 trichord, or the setting that it's used in here has become, or at least theorists have just tried to describe it as emblematic of the butterfly's wing in terms of its general shape and contour. So Puffett in particular is replaying it on thick in terms of the musical metaphors that she's trying to describe. And this didn't make get into the final draft, but there's been a lot of criticism of her analysis, and especially this summary actually came as a response that as she was facing some criticism, she was doubling down and saying, well, I'm not just defending the butterflies, I'm saying there's more, and it's the flies descending.
Did folks just not like that we're using, I don't know, imagery, like that it's like less rigorous or something?
It was a little too combination of a little bit less rigorous as well as coming from a female.
Good for you for being like, this works
yeah.
really well here, so we're gonna cite it. Yeah. We talk about this in my emotion seminar too, that there's a whole thing about emotion kind of entering late into the theorizing because it's seen as you know, less systematic or kind of antithetical to kind of formalist analysis. And most of the major emotion researchers are kind of hitting a point where they're like, even the stuff that's really formalist, when you look at it, when they start talking about the music, they're going to be using emotion terms and all this evocative language. They don't kind of even realize it's there. They're downplaying it, but first of all, it's there all along. They can't talk about it purely formally, but also that's the best way to model it, is to do both. You know, to only talk about like perceived emotion. Well, you need to engage the structure in that process.
Yes.
So same thing with all, you know, images, whatever. It's all good. And, you know, there are very clear contour arguments to be made here.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly we can hear that descending.
Absolutely.
As dark or as kind of enveloping. Yeah. So Knocked Until Dawn here. They're really distinct connections here. That the biggest similarity is from the opening of the prologue. We get in Until Dawn, a characteristic horn solo encompassing many of the central elements of the principal thematic material. Begins with a full statement of basically the same trichord, the 014, in its characteristic wing-like shape, while the camera pans over Beth, staring out into the snowy blackness. So here's video one, and this one's okay. This one has a little. Here's what here's what it looks like. So this little motive is very important.
Yes.
All right. Here's what that looks like. And these are from the JSMEG, so they have beautiful titling and everything from Andrew. also the music overlaid, which I love. Oh, hello. Right at the end there. Who's that? What's he holding? Hard to say. Anyway. The butterfly trichord appears at the beginning of the game, right after the video that introduces the butterfly effect as well. So we are having a direct relationship of music and image here. And I'm assuming you confirm this with the composer, that this was intentional, or did you point it out and then he's like, oh, cool, yeah. I assume that this was very intentional on Jason's part.
It was very intentional. Jason was kind enough to send both the original score as well as a few drafts. In terms of the original score, he was able to send whatever Sony was allowed to send, as well as a few things on his end, as well as original recordings of the stems that went into the process. So I was able to see the composition unfold as it proceeded.
Amazing. Yeah, so we know, of course, this is connected narratively. We can connect it to the butterfly, but here, we also have confirmation here that this is not accidental. Was the Pierre Lunaire connection? I'm assuming that's just. Was that something that Jason considered, or like did you throw that out to him and he was like, "Oh yeah"?
That, as far as I know, was coincidental. We have not been able to confirm that either way. Hopefully, some further discussion will either confirm or prove that to be coincidental.
That's such an awesome coincidence. I love it.
It is.
Yeah. We do have a question. I don't want to lose it in the chat here from, looks like Joanna Fartas is here. Hello, welcome. Do you think of music as a catalyst for player actions or non-actions during Until Dawn gameplay?
Well, it depends, I think, on the analyst itself. For me, I tend towards the narrative side of things. And so when I am looking at the music and how it is unfolding, I personally am not, this is probably going to offend some people, and I can already hear Dr. Grosso yelling at me from Tallahassee. I'm not concerned with whether it influences the player or not. I'm concerned with its role in the unfolding structure. However, throughout this process, I was identifying instances where it's having repeating patterns. The player has the potential to identify where cues are repeated that have specific narrative elements or narrative meanings, and the player has the ability to then take this information and then apply it to subsequent playthroughs and use that to make their own decisions. So I think I would be absolutely foolish to say that music would not have the potential to inform the player. I think it most certainly can. And I think that one of the ultimate objectives is that it will, or that it should. With that said, my particular approach and my particular philosophical bent is not similar to exploring that question. My particular approach and analytical methodology is exploring what techniques and what methods are there within the narrative itself, as opposed to the direct relationship to the player and how the player is responding.
Interesting.
So let the door open and the pitchforks come out as they state that openly. I understand.
Well, in a sense,
I've
like,
said some
it was
vitriolic things.
If you played this for thousands of hours too, the music was probably a catalyst for both action and non-action, depending on which thing you were attempting at the moment. So a little bit of both. Yeah, that's awesome. So this motif, this trichord, does get transformed in the course of the game. So there are a few major alterations in recurrences and deviations from this motif that are spelled out here. So A is the initial version. B is the modification of the second motive via augmentation of opening interval to a major third. C, we have fragmentation of a singular statement retaining the 0, 1, 4 with this nice rest in the middle. D is expanding the opening interval from a minor third to a major sixth, and then using the wing-like descending gesture to close on the implied supertonic. And then E is the expansion of the opening gesture from minor third to major sixth, as well as inversion of the closing figure ending on an implied leading tone. Very cool. So these all have specific
throughout
uses.
the process, there was a lot of set theory and transformational theory involved that got into where we had, say, overlapping trichords of the 014 to create, say, an 0135, and a lot of beautiful networks, and all of my pretty maps that the editors, who Tim Summers will remain nameless, will say this is all great stuff, but let's keep it less theoretical and easier to read, and so it all unfortunately went by the wayside.
Interesting. Yeah, actually, let's take a second, since I forgot to open with this. Where did this come from? Tell us about the process of taking this from. I remember this was a conference paper, right? And then you worked it up for JSMEG?
Yes. Yes. This was originally a conference paper for NACFGM at Hartford, Connecticut in 2019. And immediately after that, when JSMEG was just getting off the ground, and shortly after the presentation, I was approached by Tim Summers and Elizabeth Medina Gray, who said this is a very interesting topic, and we don't have many people discussing interactive dramas in general, and we would certainly love somebody to at least broach the topic, and we feel that this would be an interesting foray into the field. And so over about a year, I worked on revising, editing, cleaning all of this up and getting it readable. And thanks to their kinds, a lot of feedback and suggestions from colleagues as I dabbled my toe into the Ludo waters. Coming from the film side, I found my way sort of bridging the gap from film music into Ludomusicology and Ludo theory. And this sort of became the first effort of mine into this little hybrid area of film/music.
Yeah, I can say it's been useful. It's something that a lot of us have, we've really appreciated your film background, because not all of us have that. I know, like, Neil has it. I always wish I saw more of Neil. He's my favorite. But he's so off the grid, you know? It's not like he never shows up he comes to NACFGM and everything, but yeah, Neil's not as online. I don't think he has a Twitter. I think he finally did get a cell phone, but I don't know that he uses it much. So that's kind of the only other person in the field that has, like, extensive film background that I can think of, and then it's from a musicological side, not as much the theoretical side. So yeah. I've certainly appreciated your insights, even just on our Ludo streams. You know, you pop in with these smart references, and you're able to, like, pick things out that you're hearing probably better than some of us are doing. Julianne made the joke last night, like, we did, like, one thing where we identified something music, and she's like, "Here, you got what you came for, everyone." Like, we did one analysis. sometimes we're really prepared. Sometimes we know a game really well and we're able to speak to stuff. But yeah, the stream is definitely more freeform, unless we're doing something like prepared. But yeah, it is nice to see. So it sounds like were you kind of sad to lose your pretty charts and all of your transformation theory, or were you happy with how this ended up?
I'm happy that I was able to develop a strong, or at least I hope a strong concept of narrative potential and bring forth an area that had been underdeveloped in this sort of hybrid sphere of interactive drama, or the film game or game film, and this sort of unexplored region, being given opportunity to sort of plant a flag in an area that has remained largely developed, and being encouraged to sort of stake out this potential for your own was beyond exciting, and being encouraged to continue to explore it and to find your voice in that field, and being welcomed with such open arms has been just absolutely wonderful. In music theory, I'm sure others can voice their frustrations elsewhere. Contemporary music or popular music will often find its pushback, or it's, oh, that's interesting, but let's find something real. And so finding a particular area that has been put to the side, or that finds its difficulties even in fandom, as we had mentioned earlier, it was a little bit disconcerting at first, but to have several people encourage you to not just explore it, but to dedicate your time and your efforts to it now and into the future was just absolutely exciting. And I look forward to what follows from this. It didn't just become a completed effort. It became the first step into many larger projects. Just beyond excited for what lies ahead.
So in other words, you're just gonna save that transformation theory for your book, right? And then you'll get into it. Excellent.
and then we'll let another publisher cut it out, and I'll put it up on my blog.
There you go. If anybody else tries to cut it out, then you can just put it on the blog. But I would hope that they would allow you to like unpack that a bit in a book and like dig in, make it available.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. And honestly, thousands of I'm still like floored at that. The amount of time even Stardew Valley, I haven't done thousands, and we all know how I am about Stardew Valley.
Until Dawn has crossed over the 2,000 hour mark, I think I'm closing in on 25 for that once. Some of the Dark Pictures anthology are closing in on quadruple digits now as well.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. We're hitting beyond digits in the newest supermassive release, so we're getting up there.
Oh my gosh. And this is, what have I been saying lately, everybody? Slow scholarship. Like, look. And this isn't a knock. This is like, look what happens when you take your time and you develop it. Because I mean, like this piece here, no notes. It's so good. It is so well structured, and it's well deserved to be on the Kudo stream. I mean, it's just beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of everything. And honestly, I remember thinking that when I saw your Grand Theft Auto talk the one year. Was that GSC?
Thank you very much.
That was GSC, I think. Yeah.
That was GSC 2020, I believe.
Yeah. And I was just like, oh, I can't wait for this. Like, I know, and I don't want to rush it either, because I'm like, let it get to its like final form, let the JRPG boss morph a little bit. But yeah, I keep saying that, and maybe it's partially like I feel like I've slowed down quite a bit having a kid and the whole pandemic and everything, but I also have been thinking about like I'm not on a 10-year clock, you know? The one beautiful thing about being contingent is I am not beholden to that. So I can think really carefully as I'm starting to get my book proposal together. Ooh, by the end of the year, hopefully. I was like planning out all my chapters and like thinking about like, okay, I'm really going to need to spend time with some of these games and, you know, take that time. And like I kind of know different discourses I need to get in to theorize some of the different areas, and some of the games are well outside my wheelhouse in terms of my playing abilities, and I'm just gonna have to suck it up and do it because that's what you do. So so I just want to encourage people that I think there's all this pressure to produce very quickly, and yet we want everything to be high quality. There's the rigor on top of that. So it's like you have these kind of competing forces. One is telling you to slow down and really take your time and develop and make sure that it's where it needs to be. And then the other one is like, get it out, you know? And we have to find a balance there. So this one, I think, is a beautiful example of that. My goodness, the amount of time. And it enables you to know every inch of the game and its music. And then, of course, the conversations with Jason, too. It really shows. This is just a stunning piece of work.
Thank you very much.
Felt Cute Might Delete here is a theory master student. So came in late. So briefly, Andrew, could you just tell us who you are?
Yes, I'm Andrew S. Powell. I use the S because there's an Andrew Powell from Wales who was part of the Alan Parsons Project. I am a lecturer of music theory at Auburn University, and I am originally the film music side, and this was my first foray into Ludomusicology and Ludo music theory.
And everyone was like, yay, welcome.
Yes.
We made you feel very at home, as you've said. Roll Tide.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice. I know that's a reference. That's a thing people say from Head UA. Awesome. Brilliant. So yeah, Andrew has been welcomed with giant open arms into the field. Although, you know, not always in the mood for a hug, but, you know, virtual open arms. Like, come on into the field.
I'm a non-contact people of aversion type, but will gladly give a virtual minimal contact fist bump.
Exactly. And Brent here is our AMS Ludomusicology Study Group representative today. You want to tell us about your amazingness, your guitar god status?
I'm senior co-chair for the AMS Ludomusicology Group, and I study game music as well and film music. That was actually my first thing with my thesis and dissertation. So, we have a few, again, to remind y'all, we have a few positions coming up. If you're interested in participating, the junior co-chair, we have a secretary and a member at large position as well. Awesome. So if you're interested in that, don't hesitate to reach out. So Dr. B.A. Ferguson at Gmail.
It's a brilliant way to get involved. Yeah, and I say guitar god because I follow Brent on Instagram. And these beautiful practice videos pop up in my feed, and I'm always like, this is so cool.
Oh,
so I really enjoy that as well. And Brent has done some composing as well. So
yes.
I do a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything. It's good to have a broad skill set. Good to have a skill set. So Mystica Trials of Time is available. You can buy it. It came out. I came across that Brent is in the book that I just helped co-edit, that we've been talking about the typesetting. It's happening. But the original bio hadn't been updated since that game was like still in development. I was like, wait, did it come? And I like looked it up. I'm like, it came out already. So, which we all do that, right? We like have our bio and then we don't touch it until the next time we get asked for it, and then you're like, oh, okay.
It's going to come out in 2020, and I was like, wait, this is 2022 now.
Right. Like, where has time gone? Wasn't that Yeah, I was just talking with someone yesterday about how like my wedding was November 2019, and so it was like before all the stuff went down, and how I'm like, it feels simultaneously like yesterday and 8 years ago at the same time. I don't understand. Weird time suck that we've been in the past few years. So anyway, we have some great folks joining us today. So anyway, butterfly motive. We've had that sitting up there beautifully so y'all could memorize it. That was intentional. The B version is often tied to the physical space of, oh gosh, I already forgot. Macapichu? Pichu. Macapichu. Macapichu. I will get this. The C version is if Sam escapes the psycho in Chapter 5, finds his workshop in Chapter 7, and uncovers info that reveals his identity, which, remember, spoiler alert, it's Josh, one of our main characters. This variation of the theme is a compression of both intervallic and rhythmic content, is a direct reflection of Josh's mental state, a mind that has fragmented, focused on a single goal of revenge. So again, here's that one. Right? It was the C? Yeah, C version. So we have that is the C version. So let's hear it.
What?
So psych evaluation for Joshua Washington. Digging through the documents. So we had the first bit of that motive. And then the creepy strings.
Yep. And the strings is Jason scraping away on a piano string board that he has set up in his studio. He's just playing the upright strings with his fingers.
Oh, because it sounds almost like a creepy tremolo. Also, are we in a towel here? Looks like we just got out of the shower. Also, no passcode. Like, what are you doing, man? So the second motivic fragment triggered because we're reading the texts. The doctor reaching out, being like, are you taking your meds? So now we're like, oh, okay. We know who this is. So we get that fragmented version of the theme. The E variation is tied to unveiling, also a true identity in a way, of the Macapichu. I will say this right on the first try by the end of this video. Macapichu. Hannah had to resort to cannibalism. So remember the twin sisters that went missing. We had Hannah and Beth. And Hannah had to resort to cannibalism, consuming the remains of her deceased sister. Yikes. And as we outlined earlier, this allows the spirit of the Wendigo, the mythological creature, to enter her body and kind of take over. There is still some Hannah in there, but now there's kind of this hybrid happening with the Wendigo that has changed Hannah's features. So we also get this E variation appearing in a faster version in the final battle sequence, also connected to Hannah, which I believe is this video. There's nothing gory yet. We'll tell you when the real gore hits. Don't worry. Yeah. And it's actually I think it's not the goriest of the ones you could. Right. I think you were very careful in choosing the videos for the actual article.
Yes.
So yeah, this is this E variation.
So what? What does that mean? Did she kill her too? Her own sister?
I don't know.
How the hell could they even stay alive down here?
I don't know, Michael.
There has to be an answer down here.
Mike, just calm down.
And then in case we were like, oh. If there's any doubt. Look, there they are. Hello. Hello, friends. Ziggy Stardew says, none of these poor souls survived my playthrough, alas. Yep. Well, unless you devote a couple thousand hours, it can be really hard to see all the options. Come on. Okay. So this butterfly motive, this trichord plays a key role in the narrative. These examples have suggested a very filmic function thus far. So they appear in a connotative nature and rely on thematic manipulation as a means of conveying information to the player. So let's jump around the spectrum. What about the more ludic uses of music? In that opening theme, we get a secondary motive. So 0-1-2, which is an oscillating 4-note chromatic gesture in the cello, which is used for foreshadowing. And so shorthanded this as just the suspense motive, to not just keep using 0-1-2 over and over. The suspense motive. So it appears in a cutscene in the prologue and reoccurs at important decision points, sometimes accompanied by a bass line, which is an augmented form of itself. So here's what that looks like. So this is the one with the augmented form of itself. But it also appears just alone, but in pizzicato. And so one way to start reading this, if you pay attention to where it shows up, is that there is a real threat when we have this augmented bass line, but when it is just the pizzicato, it indicates, something's creepy or scary, but like ultimately a false threat to our characters in that moment, which is cool. So here is an example. This one I think is fine, right? There's the Death Stinger is the only one that I think has the stuff in it. I think you even label in the video though. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So we have genuine threat, and then false threat.
You just can't take a joke.
It was just a prank, Han. What did you do?
We're just messing around, Beth. It wasn't serious.
You jerks! Hannah! Hannah!
So, should we go after her?
I kind of think you're the last person she wants to see right now, Mike.
And then a false threat. So there is a jump scare here. Be prepared. But notice it's pizzicato. We don't have the accompaniment. So in this case, this is just Chris messing with them, right? We can see his jeans, we hear his voice, so we know he's just messing with them. He's trying to scare them. So that's not an actual threat, despite the jump scare. So here is a summary of all the false threat appearances, including a really fun one we will talk about here. There is one where it actually isn't a false threat. But it's kind of awesome. But for the most part, it is like these jump scares. But you are not actually in physical danger. Your character isn't gonna die as a result of that theme occurring. But it certainly does have a creepiness, and like it does prime you that like, oh no, what's happening? But you can learn to associate it with like, okay, I'm not actually gonna die here. And then here is the genuine threat appearances of the suspense motive with that augmented baseline layer underneath it. A lot of them are foreshadowing. And there's a section in here discussing that a lot of the false threat appearances are clustered in what we would call the second act of the game. So if we treat it as a 3-act structure, then a lot of the false threats are in there because there's kind of like a theme of deception in that moment, whereas the genuine threats are a little more distributed. Yeah, so we got some foreshadowing. All good stuff.
One of the things that I, especially reflecting on the setting of this example, using the legato bowed material and the augmentation setting is so antithetical to 80s film and horror genre score practice, whereas the pizzicato setting is what you would expect for horror scores. And so using the pizzicato as the false threat is such an inversion of the horror trope that it just adds to the intended effect of making you believe that there's actual danger. And it's so well done in this moment.
Yeah.
And throughout the game.
It's so good. So wait, why is this here? Why did I not put the hold on?
Oh, the musico-narrative peripeteia.
Yes.
I
so the peripeteia, for folks that are like, what? That is like the big turning point, right? The big, the twist, the big moment. So hold on, let me open my notes because apparently I got lazy and stopped copying over my notes on this. Okay, come on. It turns out I have a lot of pages. I need to start like separating things. I just have all of my Kudo streams on one Google Doc, and it is a little bit unwieldy now. There's been a lot of folks. I have a lot of pages. Okay, we're just gonna scroll down. Okay, there we go. AMS Ludo.
Our mentor kept all of his TV and film music notes all on one Word document. Scott Murphy, and it was like 300 something pages that he would just kind of go through in the middle of class. Sort of reminds me of there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And if I'm working on I usually keep things together like by project, you know? So like I'll have all my research, like for my Dragon Slayer chapter that I just did, that was all in one document. But like that didn't get, I mean, it got to be 63 pages, but it wasn't so long that it was like causing crashing. I'm going to have to like separate out my Kudo stuff into like seasons. Like, I don't know when I will delineate that, season 1, season 2, but yeah, because your notes start on my page 95 of this, so that's a lot. That's a lot. All right, so where was I? Real threat with the augmented layer. So yeah, we get this important sequence where Emily reaches a narrow crevice, and crossing that barrier triggers the turning point. Peripeteia, if you want to get fancy. Where the Macapichu, I did
Allen
it.
Street for
I
making
did it.
use of it.
I said Macapichu on the first try. The Macapichu is revealed to the player in full in a QuickTime event sequence, and after this, the stranger arrives at the lodge and explains all the folklore, and then this is the point where we realize, oh, the whole time they've been red herrings. The stranger and the psycho were the false dangers. So the music here uses the suspense motive, this bit, as the primary thematic material, with the B variation of the butterfly theme and counterpoint with it. So they are put together here. So whereas, what is this from? Is this from the opening where they're put together? The prologue?
Yes.
Okay, so whereas this was yeah, go ahead.
In Jason's original sketch. In Jason's original sketch, he had the butterfly trichord that 014 set as the original accompaniment, and throughout the game we'll have moments where we have this chromatic line oscillating figure as accompaniment, but the original score had this opening that you see at the top here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at this moment where we finally realize, like Emily finally comes into contact with our Wendigo here, our big kahuna Wendigo, I guess. We get an inversion here where the suspense theme is treated as the more melodic of the two, and now the butterfly theme is the accompaniment. So we get this actual inversion at the moment of like narrative turning point, narrative inversion, which is just beautiful. So you write figure 1 displays this reversal of fortune as the literal inversional axis between the two musical themes, pivoting around elements of range, tempo, and genuine sense of danger. Oh, so cool. So in general, the butterfly motive has served more filmic roles. The suspense motive has served more ludic functions, true versus false danger. And we get to the final thing, which is the death stinger, is a really good opportunity to explore how one theme is going to be used really for both. So it's the nice hybrid of the two. So the section, I think, is just called Ludic and Filmic Symbiosis. Okay, which video is this? This might be
I think that's the...
Okay, so this is Emily in the Mines. So that's why I'm glad they all have titles. We're gonna play this one real quick so you can see this moment. I think this has some grossness in it, so you might want to close your eyes. You can still hear the music.
No, this one should be good.
Oh, is this one okay? This isn't the...
This one's okay.
This one's okay? Okay.
No, she's just...
Oh, that's right. She's just like standing, and then it looks like you're just kind of not going into the crevice. Okay, yeah. This one's fine. So
yeah, I paused just so you can hear the music.
Yeah, pauses before going in so we can hear the theme. So yeah, okay, this is the next one will be the gory one, which again we'll tell you so you can close your eyes. But here is Emily in the Mines. You can see her looking around like, okay, player. I like, was there like a little flutter tongue or something? There was some kind of buzzy in there. I liked it. Gave it a little extra texture.
Yeah.
Okay, now we get to the death stinger, so we can explore both. Hooray! So the death stinger's presence or absence is largely based on player performance and choice, and it's musically quite uniform in its appearance. As it is, you think of video game, you have a death theme. Often the death themes are pretty consistent because they are signaling the same thing to you ludically, that, you have been killed, you have failed in this moment. So the actual theme is a C minor chord introduced by low strings and then adding upper choral voices that settle upon an E flat as the highest pitch, which Andrew argues creates an ethereal and ominous end to the character's part in the tale. And so here's where we get this specific content warning. This stinger is shown in the next clip, which contains graphic violence because a character is getting killed. So you will be able to hear it if you want to close your eyes. We'll tell you when the end of the clip is, because I don't think the sounds are too triggering. Obviously you're going to hear like, ugh, person getting killed, but I don't think the sounds are too bad.
There's a little bit of gurgling, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So
you can either, mute, look away for a moment, or just close your eyes. But if you don't want to see it, if it doesn't bother you, this is certainly not the most graphic of the things. We tried to be thoughtful today. There was one that I could tell based on the chart that I'm like, I don't want to see this one. So made sure to not have that. So here's the death stinger showing up. So poor Matt is getting sacrificed for this clip.
Get off! Get off! Let go! Let go! Ah!
almost sounds like a Gregorian chant there with the voice.
Yes.
Okay, now we get the moment. Okay, so I'm glad I stopped right there because I forgot these were actually in the same clip. So right there, we get our classic death sequence. And in chapter 7, Emily can stumble across Beth's head, the remains of Beth. So remember, Hannah is the one that has been transformed into our Wendigo. So Emily can come across the head, and we hear the death stinger here, interrupted by the shriek of the Macapichu, which implies a connection between the two. So it has this narrative significance, even though this is not a moment where Emily is getting killed. So this is a more narrative usage. So here's the moment. You might want to look away if you don't want to see a creepy head, because although I will say it's a little undercut for me, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So, creepiness incoming. We get the death stinger and the shriek, connecting the two, which makes sense because often the deaths are at the hands of the Macapichu. So there's a connection between the two, that this is like Hannah's revenge on a bunch of folks. And so when I say that gets undercut for me, the game is signaling to you that the head is an important clue. And it's just like, I don't know, it's just something about like, you knock the head off and it's looking at you, and like almost before you can really apprehend what's going on, you get this big all caps clue found, Beth's head. And the first time I watched it, I laughed, and I'm like, that's not probably the response we're supposed to have. And I do think it's different when you're watching versus playing, because you're like kind of reading like stuff on screen in the interface and like the HUD, if you have a HUD, like you're reading that differently if you're the one playing. But every time I'm just like, oh man, like, yes, thank you, game. It's clearly ahead. Anyway, end of that grossness. You can all open your eyes. Hooray! Now it's back to the butterfly on screen. So the death stinger actually appears for 7 of the protagonists and the stranger, which poor stranger. He's actually been looking out for us. He's not as, I mean, he's maybe a little creepy, but he's protective. But he's a red hair.
In traditional 80s horror director stereotypes, the stranger is performed by the writer Larry Facenda. So the expositor of the tale is the writer, and of course the writer has to let himself get killed in the story.
I love that. That's really fun. But yeah, you may remember 7. Oh, there's an 8th. There's one protagonist that doesn't get the death stinger, so we'll get there. The manner of death for each character is ironic in that it's related to a, I guess, supposed character flaw. And there's this notion of the deaths being sort of self-inflicted in the sense of the player failing through their choices or responding in the QuickTime events. But then the manner of death, the way the Macapichu kills them, ends up being related to some kind of character flaw. And this is the moment where Andrew sent me more videos beyond the ones that actually made it into the article. And before I went and watched them all, I was like, oh, okay, Sam, fail, do not move, cowardice, gutlessness. So like gutlessness implies there's probably going to be something involving the guts, right? Is this kind of like a disembowelment death? Yeah. So like,
yes,
you can imagine what some of these things are going to be. The one that I refused to watch was Emily, voyeurism / eyes for Mike. I'm like, nope, I don't do eye stuff. I've always had an aversion to eye stuff. So yeah, I was like, I shouldn't watch that one, right?
With these No, with these character flaws, it's a combination of not only the stereotypes and the archetypes of the 1980s genre, but also the incident that happened in the year prior with the prank that went wrong. What they had done was they knew that Hannah had a crush on Mike, and so they set her up to go into his room thinking that he was asking for physical amorous, I think is a polite way of phrasing it. And while she was in the process of getting ready for it, they were filming her in this very compromised position. And so it's also what happened during the prank itself. Sam, for failing to warn her that this was going to happen. Emily was the one who was recording it. Jessica was the one who was the most boisterous and laughing out loud. Chris and Ashley were largely set aside, but they were often in their own little world together, so their modes of fatality are very similar and paired to each other. So it's both a reflection of the 80s archetypes as well as the in-game story itself.
Yeah. So yeah, you can imagine how some of these things might map onto deaths, and if that doesn't bug you, you can obviously play them and find out. But yeah, it only reinforced. So I was lucky in that when I finally did see the Loading Ready Run playthrough, I didn't see any of the failures that resulted in Emily's death. So I didn't have to see that one because I would have never forgiven the game. I hold eye violence against media when I don't know. Like, if I know it's coming, I can look away, or whatever, because I just don't need to see that. But yeah, if I don't know, I'm always like, why did you have to do that? And it's actually, I don't actually have a problem with a lot of ultra violence, especially stylized stuff in modern movies, but I have to be careful because that's like the one thing. And I'm like, if it's going to be like the torture porn or the really gory stuff, there's a good chance that there's going to be something that I just don't want to see. So, ugh, no thank you. Anyway, the point being that Death Stinger shows up for almost everybody, except for the one that Hannah had the crush on. So, who I guess ostensibly wasn't involved. Was he involved in the prank? Like, did he even know?
Well, he was central to it in that he was attempting to seduce her. It is a reflection of the mythos of the Wendigo that there's still an element of humanity left in her. Mm-hmm. And Hannah still have human side of her, still has feelings for Mike. As you go through the game, you can come across items in Hannah's room that show just how strong her feelings were for Mike, even though Mike had numerous women, including two of the characters in the game. And so there's still that side of Hannah that has a love for or a desire to be with Mike, even though she's a Machu Picchu.
Mm-hmm. So there's a delineation here musically of self-inflicted doom paired with the Machu Picchu Death Stinger, symbolic of Hannah's revenge on everyone for this cruel prank. Because of course then, she's humiliated, she runs off, her sister runs after her, and then they're presumed dead after that point. So it differentiates situations where the protagonists perish through the character flaws and the repercussions of other characters, placing the impetus for their demise not within Hannah's central story, but in the consequences outlined in the peripheral wings of the unfolding butterfly effect. Such deaths are generally paired with musical ideas directly associated between the two characters involved, or silence if no discrete theme has been established. So we don't only get the Death Stinger anytime there's a death. It is deaths that are tied to Hannah. Mm-hmm. But for example, Jessica and Mike have a connection through the song Hey, 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 It's Gonna Be Okay by Stephanie Sid that shows up in every scene with them. And at one point, Jessica is abducted by the Machu Picchu in Chapter 4, but her fate in Mike's hands is based on the selection of correct paths and quick time response. So Mike will later find her body in the elevator shaft and assume she's dead, and her fate depends on whether or not she has a jaw in that moment. Okay,
that's
fun.
I wish there was a more pleasant way of summarizing that, but
yeah. But instead of the death stinger, their song plays in the distance here. Oh, good. Thank you, because I'm interested in the Sandman. Although, how directly is it from the anyway? We can talk about Sandman. I'm interested in the Sandman adaptation. I haven't sat down to watch it yet, but I loved Sandman as a teenager. You can imagine. I was like moody goth child. I used to do the little eye swirl with my eyeliner to be death. I was the happiest goth, as one of my ex-boyfriends described me in high school. Because I'm like always, I was pretty happy. I wasn't like a broody goth. I just liked the aesthetic. But I loved Neil Gaiman so much. Still do. He signed my copy of Neverwhere with "Mind the Gap, love Neil." Anyway, so instead of the death singer, their song plays in the distance, and we also get Chris and Ashley. They are linked through a music. So these are our kind of like nerdier characters, if we recall our archetypes.
Yes.
They are linked through a musical theme that ends up usurping the narrative theme of Hannah's Revenge. And this one has some really interesting usage. So this theme in general represents their growing feelings for each other in some places, but it also has some darker uses. So in chapter 6, Chris can attempt to shoot Ashley in one of the psycho's twisted games that he's, making Chris make a who else is on the chopping block there? Or is it just shoot or don't shoot Ashley?
It's one of the classic who would you execute, yourself or the love of your life? And Chris can choose between shooting himself or shooting Ashley, or refuse to shoot and let the timer run out.
Okay. So then if you do attempt to shoot Ashley, then in chapter 8, you have a quick time event where the Macapichu is after you, and you can do that successfully and escape, but then Ashley's at the door, which you would need to actually get out of the room, and she stands there coldly as it then catches you and brutally kills you. You as Chris. It kills Chris. So it triggers, and then it triggers a flashback to the shooting. So it's like it turns, instead of being Hannah's revenge, which it is also now Ashley's revenge. And so the theme that plays is their love theme instead of the death stinger, and the revenge becomes Ashley's. So the soaring lyrical theme that once symbolized their budding romance becomes prominent, emblematic of her broken heart at the forefront of the death scene and appearing before the stinger. So we do get the stinger because it is still a death at the hands of her Wendigo, but Ashley's is there first. She just sits there and watches it, which is pretty intense, but also he tried to shoot her. So
if you choose to shoot Ashley, no matter what, Chris will die.
No matter what.
It doesn't matter how the player performs in the QuickTime event sequence. So it then becomes, does Ashley get to be the one to decide Chris's fate, depending on how the player performs in the QuickTime event sequence? If the player succeeds, then it becomes ultimately Ashley's choice to let Chris die. Whereas if the player fails the QuickTime event sequence, then it becomes Hannah, the Macapichu's chance at revenge, because she is the one that catches him as opposed to Ashley sacrificing him.
Yeah. So if you fail the QuickTime event, you will hear the stinger, and then Ashley will see he hasn't survived and become hysterical, and the theme will appear representing her feelings for him. So notice the inversion there, that if she's coldly at the door not letting him escape, it's their theme first and then the stinger. But if you fail, it shows kind of the complex emotional landscape of this moment that, she clearly still has feelings for him. So it kind of flips it. So that's a fun thing, that these themes have these narrative and ludic significances, almost like that's the argument being very clearly delineated and well supported. So we already said this, the only character of the 8 to not get the death stinger is Mike, because Hannah had feelings for him. So this lack shows that his theme is related to revenge, and whatever humanity remains in her maybe rightly or wrongly, like if Mike was involved in the prank, she probably should be mad at him, but she can't quite bring herself to want to kill him the way she wants to kill everybody else. And the one guaranteed sounding of this, because you could just play really well, or have looked up a walkthrough. There's ways you could just play without hearing the death stinger, right? If you are skilled or careful in your choices. There's the guaranteed one when the stranger is killed, but the only other guaranteed sounding of the stinger is Josh's encounter with the Mecha Pichu in the final chapter, where it lacks its ludic cue but retains its narrative one, regardless of whether he identifies the Wendigo as his sister. I don't remember if I have more on that, but we'll see. Yeah, so we get to the conclusions there. Because he can never be physically killed by her. So in the final confrontation, he can be injured but still survive, and his death is only possible there's a fire at the very end, spoiler warning, spoiler warning for the whole game, in that the fire that consumes the lodge with Hannah in it, and potentially other characters. And that explosion can be triggered early by Sam or by Mike himself in a moment of self-sacrifice, finally uniting Hannah with her crush as the fire consumes the lodge, the locus of her loss of both her heart and her humanity, and the man to whom she could never truly seek retribution. I'm quoting here. This was Andrew's words. So the theme can show up without it being the revenge. It's just more connected to Hannah in that moment, which is cool. But if in the final confrontation, his fate is based on whether he's discovered the journal and knows that the Wendigo is his sister. So the stinger lacks its ludic cue but maintains its narrative one, and sounds either way. And if he survives, he isn't rescued. He's trapped in the mines and resorts to cannibalism, keeping the curse going even though Hannah will get burned up in the fire. So the Wendigo just jumps to the new host. Hooray! It was all for nothing. All in the family. So this study, conclusions? Question mark. This study brings up a whole host of issues. And in interactive drama, you point out one of the issues is you're like, I'm just looking at one type of game here. To what extent does this continuum work everywhere? What other ways can we apply some of this? Music does play an integral role, participating in the evolving narrative and informing the player both in real time and in subsequent playthroughs. Proactive and retroactive narrativity exists as a perspective feature through any current and subsequent experiences, and music maintains an intimate connection to the narrative, regardless of its filmic, ludic, or hybrid role. Form and function are simultaneously independent and interdependent on film and video game influences. So if we acknowledge that these are a hybrid medium, then solely filmic or solely ludic analysis is not really the best approach. And we're going to get probably a more interesting and better result if we treat it with both. So what is most critical here is that every possible path and outcome exists as a plausible state of equal significance. It is only through outside interference of the player that a story comes into being. So music, if it is to possess this narrativizing quality, must share this potential in its simultaneous presence and absence. It is neither explicitly filmic nor ludic. It is of the interactive drama, and it is for the player to decide whether it exists in sound or silence. Gosh, that's elegant. So elegant. Beautiful piece.
Thank you.
Brent, you had a question. I want to make sure we get to that.
Actually, I think he answered my question at some point. I was going to ask kind of the process that you went through. Did you have the music in front of you? Were you kind of tracking this as you were playing? How long did it take? Which you answered for sure. Yeah, just little, I guess, the process of doing it. How were you teasing this apart? Were you doing really analytical playthroughs? Were you doing really just kind of free playthroughs until you started noticing things, or how did that go?
So overwhelmingly, I would say my playthroughs were analytical. In a playthrough, I would notice, say, the recurrence of a particular theme or motive, and I would then do a lot of experimentation. And the way that the game is designed is you would be able to go back to say a specific chapter and then replay from that chapter, and it would then reset all of the choices that you made from that point forward. So you would have to play the game through once to get sort of a base reading and then go from there. And the first thing I did was I removed the objective of a correct playing. I think that one of the problems that games of this nature or things of this nature often do, especially when systems produce explicit challenges, like the Xbox challenges or the PlayStation gold, silver, bronze, platinum objectives, they instill this belief of right and wrong, or we have this opinion of pass fail for things. Is the goal is completion. And so I wanted to complete an playthrough and then go back incrementally and say, well, if this was a branching point, what would happen if I took option B as opposed to what I did the first time? And then slowly but surely back my way up and find where the most significant paths were and see where the ripple effects are. And then as I was going through, finding where these critical junctures were and making note of where the important cues that were being repeated were. Some of it was just being honest, a lot of blind luck, and a lot of it also coming from the film experience of traditional narrative construction and to expect in filmic processes and filmic influences, knowing certain patterns or identifying certain tendencies. And so applying that experience into it was incredibly helpful along the way. Just because there are so many different options, it's just a very time-consuming process. And a good part of the process is also being out which of the branching paths are non-essential. There will be some instances where you may be presented with 5 options. 4 of them will lead to option 5 no matter what you do. Sometimes you'll be presented with 2 options, both of which have significant influences, and it's a matter of trial and error. And that's the point of games of this nature, is you have to experience the fullness of it, is you have to go through and find out what happens. And sometimes it would be as simple as a dialogue choice will have 2 different music cues that differ by a bass line, but that bass line is fundamental to narrative elements. And so it really is being willing to test them all out and go through it.
And are you transcribing, or do you have like the score in front? Are you like transcribing as these one-time things go by and then it auto saves and you can't go back or anything like that?
Or was it all gameplay capture and then you went through the gameplay capture?
Yeah.
It is gameplay capture, and then you go back and transcribe the gameplay capture. And so on my computer, there are several hours and several clips and clips of the score. And one that makes the transcription exceedingly hard from this game is that it's a lot of aleatoric writing. Mm-hmm. And so you are hoping that you get even sort of the main elements. Thankfully, there's some motivic writing, there's some harmonic elements, but even in those areas, you're getting things that are just time spans. You're getting improvise along these notes for 7 seconds, and so it's a lot of guessing in some areas. And then thankfully, with the kindness of Jason and being able to improve my accuracy with the little bits of the score that we could get, and especially with a game of this nature, you can't use a commercial recording because the commercial recording is usually different than the actual in-game score itself. So you have to do a genuine recording of gameplay, and you have to go through the transcription process. You can use the commercial score for perhaps cleaning up certain areas, but it was all done via transcription, double checking where I was able to with the segments that Jason sent, and going by ear.
And I imagine that's familiar to you from film because, right, the soundtrack is not at all the cue as it was used in the film. So, like, you have that same problem that exists where we kind of create this version, this official version, and then you look at it, you're like, wait, that's not quite. It has the major melodies, but now it's kind of turned into a musical object in a very different way.
Thank you for answering my question. I really appreciate it.
Oh, of course.
I love hearing about that. Gosh. So good. I'm so glad we were able to finally do this one. I've been looking forward to this. When I saw that it was, I started in April or May, this whole project. And I was like, man, that feels like so long to wait till September, but I'm glad we finally got here. I'm so happy to do this. So
no, thank you for the opportunity.
What's next? You said you have more work on other games of Jason's.
Yes.
Very exciting.
This
has been a catalyst.
With the encouragement of Tim Summers, the ideal goal is to eventually produce a book discussing interactive dramas and really laying down the foundation for this genre. We'll be looking at the Dark Pictures Anthology, which is the series of titles produced by Supermassive Studios. Don't Nod Studios, the people who did Life is Strange. We'll be looking at Quantic Dream, the works of David Cage, Fahrenheit, Heavy Rain, Eternals, what is it? Beyond Two Souls, I think it's called. And Detroit Become Human.
Oh.
And we'll also do, and we'll do a little bit of work in some of the visual novels, just quite a bit there. But the ultimate goal is to do a monograph on the interactive drama.
I love that.
And so we believe that's going to be the first of its kind. So fingers crossed that sometime in the next decade we can get that all put together.
Yay! Yeah, I was going to say the work I've done on visual novels, one of the differences is instead of having the strict autosave kind of locking you out, you can often just do a save right before a major dialogue point and then go, wait, well, what if I select the other thing and then just go back to the, I did that when I worked on Katawa Shoujo, which I'm coming back to for the gender book. I was able to, it was still... I didn't put nearly as much time into it because I didn't have to. I also read quickly, which helps. I was able to kind of go back to all the decision points and kind of figure it out that way and get all the scenes. And now it's all open to me where I can kind of see all of them. But the process wasn't as painstaking because I didn't have to start over every single time. So I can only imagine, as Arthseth noticed that like awareness that things could be closed off to you is like made really explicit in this game. Whereas in a lot of those visual novels, they know that people want to see all the endings. And so like the mechanics are built so that, okay, it's a lot of text to sift through. They have even that mechanic where you can kind of skip through dialogue that you've already seen and it will then like fast forward and then stop at the moment where it diverges. So that's kind of a way to encourage that completionist bent to kind of see all the storylines and everything. Can't wait to see more from you. This is so exciting. Other than that, just teaching a zillion students this semester. Andrew has I'm just going to tell everyone, Andrew has a class this semester of 450. Can you imagine? I thought I had, how many in my first... couple hundred in my first video game class for Ohio State, and I thought that was a lot. But can you imagine? I have like I have just under 40 this semester between 2 classes. I can't imagine. So Godspeed to you, teaching all of those folks, shaping all of these wonderful minds. Thank you all for giving us so much time and thought and care. It was really nice to have you here today. Anybody else have any shout outs to throw out there? Come see. There's going to be a Ludo session at MegaCon if you go to MegaCon. So, which I didn't realize was what people had started calling it. So I was like, what is this conference? And then I realized they were talking about like AMS, SMT, SEM in New Orleans. Took me a while to like get hip to that. But yeah, New Orleans in November. There is both a Ludo session. There is also, I'm going to talk with Will Gibbons and Stefan. Are you still in our thing? Stefan was in our session, but mentioned there might be a conflict. But possibly all 3 of us, but at least Will and I are on a session on Thursday, so that'll be fun. Maybe we'll put together a little list of like everything kind of Ludo adjacent. I know Disability always does that every year. Yeah, it's on. Oh, they haven't gotten back. Yeah, so we'll see. Disability always does that where they're like, here's all the disability papers, whether or not it's like an official session. And that's really useful if you're interested. You're like, oh, I can, plan my schedule a little bit. So that's something to maybe go through. And so for folks that do decide to go, I know I will certainly be live tweeting everything that I can, as I always do at Musicologess on Twitter. Maybe recording at least mine. Others as they, want it recorded or whatever and distributed. But we can do a little bit of that too. And other than that, next week, instead of featuring published work in the field, we're going to focus on the future of the field. I'm going to run my second workshop on much better abstract tactics, also known as Wombat. Thanks, Pete Smucker, for coining that term. So I am your Wombat tactical leader here. And the whole purpose of it is to get us ready, because mid-October is the deadline for the North American Conference on Video Game Music, to submit a proposal, either to speak and give a paper, kind of in a traditional conference format. There is also a recital, so if you are a performer, you can submit to perform as well. But I will specifically be helping with the sort of academic side, and we will talk about abstract writing, components of a good abstract, working things into, limited word counts, sort of how to make the most of limited space available. And from there, if folks that saw my last one, I'm hopefully going to be a little less long-winded, but basically do the same thing I did last time, where I'm going to take an abstract of mine from a former conference. I unwrote it into successively worse versions. So we'll start with like a bad abstract of it, of the same topic. And like, it's a little exaggerated, but I tried to make it somewhat realistic. And then we'll build it up to an intermediate level where it's like, okay, this is better. And then we'll show like the progression all the way up to the accepted version that was actually given. So I think that can be kind of helpful to just sort of see the little tweaks that can improve everything. So that's the plan for next week. I'll be releasing the October schedule soon, I hope. But the week after Wombat is going to be Elizabeth Medina Gray's Flower chapter, which is one of my favorites. So join us in 2 weeks for that. I will release the full schedule. I've been bad about that because the semester and folks haven't been responsive via email. So I'm like trying to nail down some of my folks, which is fine. We're all teaching a lot. But I should have the October and hopefully November schedule finalized soon. I will post that on the Discord. Other than that, thank you all for spending your Friday afternoon with us. Enjoy your weekend. Play some Until Dawn if you're feeling the start of spooky season here heading into October. Otherwise, play some Animal Crossing. If you want something cozy. And we will see you next time. Thanks for joining.